Okay, hold on.
There's everyone.
Welcome. What a great group.
Gwen, lovely to see you.
Hmm.
Yeah. And there's Marie. All right. Oh, good crowd today. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for those of you for whom this is your first time, we do these once a month. We have an ongoing theme for this year of looking at readiness. And we sort of move between sort of yin and yang energies. So this happens to be a yin piece. So we'll talk a bit about receptivity. And we do this every month, like I said, and every month we have a little special topic related to readiness. And then in January, we'll start a new topic for the year. So these are just a way for you to have a taste of what we do and how we are. They tend to be very short on content and very long on conversation and with each other. So with that, Karen wanted a new name today. This is actually Karen Weatherford, disguised today as Ginger Rogers, for any of you old enough to know who that is.
It's a test.
Yeah.
Either way, she's really fun. So
yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
All of these Gene Kelly will be all set. But so Karen will be the host, and so we have a very active chat box in this these sessions. So if things come up along the way, things you want to ask or share, you always happen to just wave us down, and or put something in the chat box, and Karen will pick that up for us. So maybe just to say hello, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat box, just a maybe half sentence or a few words about your relationship with receiving. Do you like to receive? Do you hate receiving? Do you feel comfortable, not comfortable? Look forward to it, don't look forward to it. It depends. So Scott, maybe you can cheat and have two posts. It depends on what.
It depends on who is sending the message, what the content of the message is, and sort of my mental ecosystem at that moment.
Okay, those are all good considerations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
There are some who just basically open and love it.
Okay. Yeah.
Bring it even.
Wow.
Woo.
I'm not that involved yet, so I admire that person already.
Sometimes a little overwhelming. Someone says they've been working on this for years without keeping score, or trying not to keep score. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Open, but there's some learning involved. For some, giving's a little easier.
Yeah. And it's also interesting. Some of us find it easier to receive difficult things than it is to receive good things. Some of us like receiving good things, but are closed off to difficult things. So it's just an interesting thing we don't often talk about. We often talk about what are we giving or doing. And I just find this particularly interesting topic.
Someone else said it's simply a frame of mind they keep perfecting.
Okay.
Someone is really hesitating about answering the question. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're always welcome to keep putting them in the chat box. And I'm going to switch over and put on some slides for us. Kind of Zoom's adding all these things in the menu bar now. Used to be so simple.
Yeah.
Are you ready to receive that, David?
No.
No.
Well, Zoom's the penultimate practice in receiving, because they change everything about every 4 days. So
Right.
it's good practice in just letting go. So we're going to talk about this idea of centering, but we're actually going to think about centering in a way that's probably different than most of us would have thought about it otherwise. And you'll see why in just a couple of minutes. So we always sort of put some markers sort of as orientation for the topic. And so this is the one for today. So again, our theme is readiness. Our focus is on the role of centering. And we have one question which we sort of sit with for the 90 minutes. And this one is, what if we started in the center where the conversation is ready to reveal what matters most? And by that I mean, we often think of centering something that we do in ourselves, to center ourselves maybe before a difficult conversation, or center ourselves before we see a client. And often when we think about others, we are centering ourselves so we can go engage them, or go engage a topic or something we're reflecting on. And I'm going to flip that around. And what if we were focusing on centering ourselves in what's out there as opposed to just in ourselves? And so, and I'm going to share an anecdote in a minute to illustrate kind of where this came from. But I'm just really fascinated now in the sort of world that we live in about, are there some elements of that yin or more feminine or energy that would be really helpful to have more of at this moment in time? And part of that is decentering ourselves as a practitioner, so we can center not only the other person, but also the kind of the essence of their story, or the essence of the moment that we're in that's trying to reveal itself. What if we started there? And in large part, it's because not only is it a valuable practice in itself, but it also helps to bypass a lot of the resistance, defenses, projections that we often encounter when we're trying to get other people to, like a client, say, for example, to pay attention to something that might be difficult. And so in the course of navigating a family visit over the weekend, I invented a new integrative development practice and I'll tell you more in just a minute. So I'll let you read this, and then I'll show you what this means for me as a setup for the story and then our practice. In the worlds in which many of us grew up, we were taught to set goals and make plans and have agendas and be organized and figure things out and be helpful and all kinds of things, which are good life skills in many ways. But I observe in developing and mentoring practitioners that sometimes we get too caught up in that, and we're worried about how well we're doing and what's the next question I need to be asking. And so I've been really playing for all year long with this idea of this moment is your curriculum. And so what's the curriculum trying to make available to us or help us to see? And how can we move into the center of that moment to be able to get clear what's trying to be revealed to us, rather than trying to effort our way to figure it out? Otherwise, it's sort of like asking this young person in our photograph here to describe the trees around the corner. He or she has no idea, because they're not there and it's foggy. So all they know is the tree, this point, and they're standing right now in the forest. And so one of the distinctions we talk a lot about in our work is that mastery is about getting to the center. So how do we even do that? How do we find the center? How do we get to the crux of issues? How do we pay deeper and deeper attention? And I'm going to offer as a distinction that another way to think about that is maturity is about letting the center come to you. I observe that many of us try to make too much happen. We often over effort in our belief that if we don't make something happen, it won't happen. which again are all great skills. But I want to explore today what it's like to allow the center to come to you, just to see what that experience is like and what it generates. And so the way I think about this is inviting us to stand in the center when it is ready. So I'm going to give you just a brief example from 2 days ago. So my father passed away almost 24 years ago now. I was not there. I was actually overseas at the time. And my younger brother and my mother were present when he died. And for a lot of historical reasons, they refused to ever talk about that. And so even though I was quite close to my father and I've done a lot of Bardo work and other things since then, it always was this piece that was incomplete. I want to know what the last few minutes of his life were like. And there are only 2 people on the planet that knew that, which were them. And I've tried a number of different ways. Well, you're just, they have a lot of issues. So I just always met resistance. Well, you weren't there, and it's too hard to explain, and blah, blah, blah. And I had another relative visiting who I like a lot, who also has a lot of skills in these space. And so I thought, I think there's going to be an opening for them to actually share, but I'm not going to ask them in the way I would have in the past. And so one of the things I did to ready myself was I asked, if I only got them to say one thing, what is the thing I most want to know? What would be most healing for me in this incomplete journey of saying goodbye to my father? So that came to me fairly quickly as I sat with that. And we got talking about families of origin and extended family that goes way back, and a few recent deaths we'd had in our extended family. And there was a word, and I wish I could remember what the word was, but there was a word in something my uncle said to my mom about dying and the mystery of dying or something like that. And I said, this is that opening. And so I just, rather than trying to ask for permission or would you be willing, I just said, I'm just really curious, was Dad aware that he was dying? Long pause. And both of them dropped into that felt memory themselves and shared from the center of that core experience, which was saying goodbye to him in the few minutes he sort of lingered between life and death. And they shared openly, they shared clearly, cleanly, maturely, in ways I've never seen either of them speak in all my life. And so I felt like it was almost like I was transported back to that moment in the hallway at at their house. And so and then they shared a couple more things. I asked, I think, one follow-up question, and then I was complete. And what I realized was that rather than trying to go through them to get to that moment in time, I'd invited them to go into that moment in time and re-experience it in a way that was meaningful and doable for them, and go stand in that place with them so I can imagine myself as if I were standing there in the hallway as his life was ebbing away. And the beauty of this is there was no defense, there was no resistance, there was no even like, oh, dang, he tricked us into saying these things. There was after 24 years of waiting, a completion by being willing to stand in the center when it was ready. When that moment came, I stepped into that center with a simple question and got the very thing I wanted most, which was what this experience might have been like for my father. And it was extraordinary what they described. And so I'm just going to stop there for a minute and just see if anything is coming up for you in this idea of starting in the center. Anything you'd like to share, ask, reflect on, because I'm going to ask you to do something similar for yourself as the core of our time here today. But for now, is there anything you'd like to say? Again, you can put it in the chat box, or you can put up your hand and Ginger and or I will call on you. Everybody okay? Rosalinda's clapping.
Well, Pamela says, what was different that last time? What did you notice?
Great question. So I've spent several months orchestrating this visit of my uncle to my mom for a number of reasons. I was at the uncle's family, their wedding a few months ago, and I just started to realize that there's all these pieces of my family of origin on my mom's side that are floating around, and normally I would be the weaver that would tie them together, and I was sort of done with that role. But I realized I had a few things that I wanted to accomplish for myself and my own journey, as well as my mom nears 90, helping her find a bit more peace about things. And so what I noticed was different was I played a role that was similar, but in a place where I could be more subtle about it and more direct. One of the phrases we have a lot in our ID program is to notice out loud and speak plainly, which is exactly what I did. And so the conversation was simpler, more elemental. The two of them who normally avoid these kind of things like the plague, somehow we're not even agitated by it. We could just like, oh, okay, and just sort of join in this sort of new way of being together, which I've never had a conversation in 67 years like that with my mother. Well, I don't know about the first couple of years, but let's say the last 60 years. And I just attribute it to not trying to bring them into something or try to make something happen with them or finally get somewhere with them. I just bypassed them altogether in a way and said, what is the essence of this thing about the secret in my family about dad dying? What's that about? And so it was almost like in my mind, I actually teleported myself into their hallway where he died, which I stood in there before my mom sold the house. So I knew exactly what it looked like. And then just stood there and then noticed the question that was arising, which I then asked very calmly, very simply, and very plainly and matter-of-factly. And what I found was that the usual role that they think I play in the family, et cetera, wasn't an issue because this wasn't even about me. And it was about the experience. And in a way, it just sort of invited them into a way of being that I've never seen in either of them. All right. Robert, you have a question?
I have a comment.
Okay.
That this slide in your story has triggered. It's very well fit into the work that I'm doing currently. I've had over the last even 3 weeks or so, I've had tremendous movement in my life. Transitional sort of developments that have been more or less stuck for decades.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've been looking at is the ancient Greek distinction between chronos, like calendar time, and kairos as appropriateness time, of fitting time, of right time. And this sense of to stand in the center when it is ready. The center is movement. It's constant movement. That's what everything is the center is constantly moving. And as a finite human being, I have no access or very little access to that moving center. Where I have much more access is to connect to the perimeter, which follows the center, but is much more stable because it's somewhat diffuse and organized around the center. So it's a larger space, as it were. If I connect to the center, to the perimeter, that is my best access to the center.
Okay.
Because I cannot access the center, but the perimeter follows the center. It's around the center. So this notion of avoiding the mind is very attractive to me. I've spent my whole life practically lost in my mind of trying to get the answer or the technique or the right teacher or whatever. None of them were ever right because they don't exist. They don't get it for me. I have to stand in the center or in the periphery of the center and move myself. So this is very, very useful. And incidentally, not so incidentally, I did come to the conclusion I need to start the IB program in January. So I'll be in touch about it.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
All right. So, oh, somebody else got their hand up. What's that? Oh, it's just you, it's Ginger.
Well, David, there are two other questions, but you may choose to move on. They're taking your lead as to continuing to ask you to drop into your own experience. So
okay, that's fine. I'll be happy to.
You're okay? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll read both of them and you can decide what you'd like to do with them.
Okay.
Rosalinda says, how did your energy change from beginning to end? And then the second question is, how did you receive the closure of his death, which you started, you've talked a little bit about that around that. Yeah.
Without getting too esoteric, so it's often over my whole life, I've had these sensations of being able to travel through time and space. So once I've been somewhere, I can remember it for the rest of my life. So part of the receiving was, well, I'll give you an experience first. I felt completely free. I felt completely free of my family system. This was the last piece that I needed. I think, which I had not realized until it was done. And I realized that now helping them kind of figure out what they're going to do with their generation and all the family stuff and my unwillingness to take it on. And it was just very freeing, and it just felt very gratifying. At first, I thought I would feel like a wave of grief would come again or sadness. But it was more like, and so it is, right? It was more of like I said, a sense of completion. And it's like, almost like my dad's like, yeah, we're all good now. I'm fine. The circle is complete. And it was, and what you'll start to realize is that as you start to work more this way, which I've been really focusing on a lot this year, you start noticing that these openings are everywhere, and that the things that you need to support you, to scaffold you to be there, will show up if you move towards the center and get clear what you're moving towards. It's been amazing this year what shows up. And I don't, so that's kind of what I'm noticing in my experience. I felt I felt liberated. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, David.
Oh, you're most welcome. So let's see, 35, 40. So here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to put up this slide, and I'm going to encourage you to take a screenshot of this if you would like, because you're going to need these instructions. And so you're going to have 45 minutes for this. So you should have time to do, we'll put you in groups of 3. You'll easily have time to do 2, and probably all 3 of you to have a chance to do this. What I'm going to invite you to do, and I brought the picture forward so you have that, but just talk about something that you're searching for. Could be clarity, an answer, a new opportunity, a lover, who knows what you're looking for, but something that you're searching for inside or outside yourself. And just share a story about that. That's something or someone. And then the other 2 people in your group are going to listen to you and inquire into your story, not about. So for those of you who have not been to narrative coaching, we're not gathering information about the story. We're not, probing the story or interrogating them. We're asking them, we're inquiring into the experience they're having as they're telling the story. What are they noticing about their words, their body, the telling itself? So they become more and more aware of themselves. And then as you listen, I would like you to write down 4 or 5 key things as gestures, words, metaphors, sensations, emotions that emerge that seem to be significant for you without even understanding why. And then when you're after about 5 minutes of sharing, we don't need the whole story, but after 5 minutes of story, you should have enough. I'd like you to share those with the person who was telling the story. And it maybe in some ways speaks to the heart of their story or the center of their story. And then I'd like the teller just to speak plainly to what comes up for you, what emerges for you as you're being with that word or that gesture. You might play with it, you might repeat it, you might work with it. And just start speaking to this as if you're in that word or in the experience of that word, which is at the core of your story. And after they've had a chance to do that for a bit and see what emerges, I'm going to ask you just to spend a few minutes sharing what you noticed and what you experienced. I'm going to offer a caveat, and I see Sharon's got her hand up, but the caveat is this is not a time to discuss or debrief. Do not debrief the activity. Because then you'll be lost in your cognition in your head, and the experience will fade. It's really more about just sharing. This is what I felt. This is what I noticed. This is what I experienced, without a diagnosis or an assessment or anything. Just to share a couple of things that stood out for you about the experience. Okay, so Sharon, you got a hand up, and then I'll have to take any more questions before Karen puts you into small groups. Sharon.
I'm just wanting a little more about the distinction you're making between inquire into, not about.
Yeah. So the easiest way I think about this is that you are aiming your questions at the person who's telling the story, so that to help them be clear. So your question functions as a mirror that you're holding up to them. So the only person who's seeing things as a result of your question is them. If the mirror is pointed to you, that means you're trying to ask about to gather information so you understand, which is not necessary at all. So it's really just, and if you think about it, if it helps you, maybe there's a moat between you and the client. Maybe there's a wall, anything that allows you to not feel like you're going to ask them for things to come back to you. It just stays over there with the client in their own experience. Does that help? You want more?
Yeah.
I can muddle through with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
David, we do have one question that was brought in.
Sure.
Is there any sort of container or setup for this, just in case this deep type of inquiry might evoke some sort of trauma?
Probably. So again, so we will be here in the main room while you're in your breakout room. If at any point you feel like the process, either yours or one you're part of, is more than you'd like to deal with for whatever reason, you're all welcome to leave your room. Just tell your folks you're leaving, and you're welcome to come back into the main room, and you can either be with us or you can just be quiet and care for yourself with your video and audio off. If you want to talk to us, we can do that as well. So we will trust you to be in your groups in ways that will work for you, and for you to manage yourself and get support if you need that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We are ready to go on this end if everybody's ready.
Okay.
We have one group of 4. I'll just let you know that. So we are going to have 45 minutes for this exercise.
Yep.
And I'm going to send you off. And as David said, return at any time if you wish. We'll be here. See you all in about 45 minutes.
There we go. All right. I'll have a closing slide in just a minute. Michelle's smiling. That's always good to see. But we've got about 15 minutes. I just want to do a check-in and see what emerged for you in your conversations. What did you notice about the center?
Oh, I'll go.
Yeah, let me.
Yeah, I was with Michelle and Jean Alvire, and I think right now for me, what's emerged is just tears of joy.
Hmm.
You know, hearing we had just one person, and then we went through the whole process, and it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. Resonance all over the place, discovery and tears and laughter. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was thinking as you were speaking, were you in my group too? I had a similar experience, and it was just so spacious and grounding. Be in the center and look out and say, "What now?"
And Julie, for me, the magic of this is that, like, if I think about my story, I discerned what I most needed from the conversation if it were to happen once I already had gone to the center of the conversation. And then the question I asked came to me in that second and not before. I could just feel that there was a door open that had never been there. I don't know why I felt it, but it was true. And then once I stood there in my mind or heart or whatever, the question became very clear. Yeah.
It reminds me of your photo of the path where the fireflies light up as you're walking.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Very similar. Who else would like to share about their experience or their observations? Or anything else? Is it Ebeth? Is that
Yes, Yvette.
Ebeth? Okay,
Yvette.
well, you say it much better than I
Yes.
do, so.
It's fine. I have two questions for you. First,
Yes.
I'm going to share our experience.
Okay.
For us, well, first of all, this was the first time for both of us taking part of these kind of sessions. So we spent some time clarifying what the exercise was. And could you please explain to me, when you talk about center, is it the center of, or like the center of the conversation for each individual, what is really important to us, what is really happening in that story that we were supposed to be able to perceive? Or was it more like what we were sensing the other person was saying or feeling or experiencing?
Well, it's sort of yes and no. It is those things, but that's not the part I was focusing on. Those are true and important, but I was thinking more in terms of imagining that whatever it is that you're wanting to explore or notice about your situation or your story, that awareness or that clarity has a center outside of us, and so, like, it's that's why I asked you to pick an object or a word. Is like, become the word, stand in the word, be the object. What does the story look like from the object's perspective? Because for whatever reason that was chosen, so it must say something about the essence of the story and in ways you probably don't understand until you choose it. And so it was mostly just allowing ourselves to receive from the center of the story not from our own mind or our own agenda or our own actions. It helps if we are centered ourselves, but more could we step into something that we had been invited to by something in the story. And only once we commit to that does what the story is trying to invite us to notice become clear to us.
For us, the exchange between the two of us,
Okay.
to us, was that shift of that story.
Okay.
After we talked, we told our stories, we realized that what we were saying, and when we heard the other reflecting on our story, giving us her insights, we realized that our story has shifted, even though we kept our center.
Yeah.
That was our experience.
Wonderful. Well, and the beauty is that the beauty of these activities, we're not in school. This is not an assignment you're going to be graded on. So you always have permission to make these assignments, to do them in whatever way you want to, or they end up happening anyways. So I'm glad it served you. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. How about from anybody that hasn't spoken yet? Maybe one of our quieter people is seeing a lot of things, but hasn't spoken yet. Stephanie. Oh, yeah, there you are.
Hi. So I was trying to find the hand, but I couldn't. So for us, we were the group of 4.
Okay.
And it absolutely needed to be the group of 4. It was just perfect. And so I shared, and I'm on this path, I'm on this trajectory. I know what I need to know and do and all that, but there's still this, like, the habits. And what came up was the image that was shared became my sustainable anchor. So every time I start to feel this stepping into fixer, I'm going to feel the forest. I'm going to feel the soil and the connections. And I can look up and I can see that there's a vast, it's like, it's not about me. It's about the field. And it was just absolutely perfect, because that's what I needed. I just needed to find a way to anchor it and hold it in place. And so, and then the conversation after was so generative. So many, many thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And David, I'm aware of time. We wanted to leave enough time at the end of this to introduce some exciting things that are coming up and help people have a chance to ask questions about that.
Okay.
I've put in the chat some links, and we can go through all that.
Yeah. So, this is sort of a way we do this always at the end to kind of summarize what one of the, I think, are the key points. You have your own key points, but yeah, why I think this is important and why a lot of the work I'm doing now is on exploring maturation as a practitioner. And this work for me now is so much about being agile enough to step into the moment when it's ready, and becoming much more discerning about that and really attending to that. And one of the ways we talk a lot about that is, as we said in the beginning, this moment is your curriculum. That's all you need. And as part of that, when we can do that, we can access what matters most to you and invite others to meet you there. So again, part of the power of my encounter with that part of my family was without any dramatics, which it would have been if I had tried to do anything overt. They actually, without any instruction, met me into a place that I've never seen either of them before. And once that period passed, they kind of went back to being more themselves, but it just showed me the power of inviting other people without having to use our words even into that space, to be able, so we can receive from the center rather than fight or challenge the periphery that we often had to deal with in the past. And And so the invitation is just for you to notice, where can you try this in your own life or practice as you leave today? If you want to share any thoughts with everybody else, you can always log on to our forum. You can get into this part of the forum for free, and just share any thoughts or reflections or things that you realize after we're done. And we've got a number of things coming up next year. I know that Karen's put that in the chat box. We're starting our new programs in January. We're also starting practice groups for our narrative coaches, as well as continuing on with the BCE and a whole bunch of other things to kind of decenter some of the programming. And what's the opposite of decenter? Recenter? More ways for people to connect to each other. In the times we're in, we need each other in ways that we may not have a few years ago, far more than we need more stuff. So we're going to find ways to kind of help support that journey for everybody. And so if you're interested in any of that, you can just click on one of the links that Karen put in the chat box for you. Any final thoughts before we call it a day? I'm really curious from any of you that were here for the first time what your impression was, or what are you taking from this? Liam.
Hi, David.
Hey.
I'm not here for the first time.
I know. That's okay.
I think the one of the things that kind of stood out to me was, and I was reflecting on this coming out of the out of our group, was that if it took 24 years for you to kind of get to the center of your story, that it's kind of okay to take time and to allow our clients' story to emerge and to feel ready to sort of step towards the center. I think that was I found that quite instructive.
Yeah, and what it reminded me too on the same lines is that it just gives me infinitely even more patience with my clients. So I needed these two people to participate in my journey, and for 24 years they refused. And the same is true for our clients. We often make a lot of hoopla about their own self-agency and whatnot, self-authoring, which is really important. But oftentimes there's constraints and things in their life that we don't know about. And so bringing that kindness and compassion for them and inviting them to begin to see, when it's time, and rather than trying to anticipate or plan for it in advance, notice what happens to come up next. And I set all this up in the beginning because I felt like something important was going to happen, but I didn't know what until I got there. All right. Well, Marie, did you want to speak? Yeah, good to see you.
David, I just want to thank you for creating a container where we can just push a few buttons on our computer and go very deeply, very quickly, just boom, like that. So I got to go to Canada and Alameda from here in Santa Fe, and we just clicked in like we'd known each other for ages. So thank you for the gift of this.
You're most welcome. It's good to see you. All right, my friends, we'll be back again in November. We'll be in the Young's energy space, so we'll have to see. These things usually get channeled to me in a few minutes, a day or two before we meet, and so I await the next message to bring. So, all right, be well. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
All right,
Ginger, thank you too. Bye.
Bye.
Have a lovely evening.
Bye, Michelle.
See you down.
Adios, everyone.
Bye, Robert.